So you've had quite a career, Marcy. May I call you Marcy or shall I call you Marcella?
Please call me Marcy.
Marcy. Okay. We're on a first name basis here, but you are Marcella to your fans, and you've had quite a life, quite a career. There's lots to talk about. But the main thing to at least start talking about is the Jewel record, which is was not your debut record, but for a lot of people, the first solo record that people may have heard of you because it came out around the same time that Shakespeare's Sister had exploded and then actually kind of imploded. And yeah, the first time I ever interviewed you, I can't believe it was already like 6 years ago, but it was when Shakespeare Sister reunited, and we, kind of talked about all the drama that happened with that group. And now that I'm talking with you today, and I've done research for this interview, I kind of didn't realize that the end of Shakespeare Sister and kind of all that drama sort of was happening around the time that you were making and releasing Jewel. It was a very busy time in your life. I'll just let you talk about the whole backdrop of you making this record in this crazy time around 93, 94.
Yeah, that's right. It was during the time we were actually touring for Hormonally Yours, um, it was announced, Siobhan announced that she didn't want, the plan was always that I was going to do a record after we did the touring for Shakespeare's Sister. She wanted to take a break and be with her family. So I was preparing and collecting ideas while we were touring, on planes and buses and whatever, gathering ideas for my album and, what I wanted to express. And then it was announced that the band, well, I was no longer in the band. So I was like, oh man. Okay, so well, I'm glad I had, started my quest for, songs and me as an artist and what it was that I wanted to express. So touring with Shakespeare's Sister, working on my ideas for my album, and any chance I could when I got home. I had a proper analog studio in my home. So when I got home, I would start putting the tracks down, see how they sounded, doing a lot of programming and playing everything. And I used my Trident. I had a really cool Trident board and a great 2-inch tape machine. So yeah, it was a lot of go on tour, come back home, home in LA and home in London. I mean, wherever was home at the time, I just made it work, and also juggling the role of being a mom at the same time for the first time. So
Wow.
luckily, I had my husband, and we had a nanny, but anyway, so that really helped. But it was a crazy time. It was a busy time, but I knew what I wanted. I did a lot of the programming, and when the material was played to Chris Thomas, who would eventually end up producing it, he I mean, he never said, "Hey man, I really love this," but obviously he really loved what I did, because I brought over the floppy disks with all my programming on it, and popped it into his the guy who was doing the sound design named Matthew Vaughn, and we worked with what I originally had, and we built the
Wow.
tracks up from there. Chris heard it going, giving more of a live feel. I was looking to do something that was a little bit more adventurous, more like, let's say, like Bjork, or there was this artist named Stina Nordenstam that I really liked at the time. I think she was Norwegian, but yeah, I wanted to do something adventurous. And I think we did, in that, the programming was very adventurous, but also I think it was a good idea in hindsight to bring in the live elements and real musicians playing, to give it more of a real kind of feel.
Well, it's interesting because, coming off of the huge success of Stay. I mean, it was a big song here in America. It was like a top 5 hit, but like in England, it was like quite literally the biggest song of that year, and it won multiple awards, and it was just this, huge iconic song with your vocals at the front and center, which was unlike the other Shakespeare Sister singles, you know, like you're the star of that song basically. So it seemed like for people who weren't familiar with your solo career before, like the perfect launching board for your solo career on both sides of the pond, but especially in England. So, I mean, you know, having, you know, read your memoir and stuff, it kind of seemed like it didn't get maybe the push it should have, or kind of maybe got lost in the shuffle, which, you know, again, seems surprising to me because it's like the star of this huge, biggest song of 1993 or something is coming out with her new solo record. It seemed like you'd be like George Michael or something, you know, or Beyonce, you know, the person who breaks out with the big solo career.
Lindsay, I should have worn more Superwomen outfits.
Maybe that was it.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's talk about the fact that, you know, now it's getting this reissue treatment. So, you know, it's getting kind of the treatment it deserves. But it was kind of like a lot of kind of things didn't go right when this record came out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's inexplicable, really. I don't know. It's a mystery. You know, you just never know what is going to fly and what's not. You do your best. You give 1,000,000%. You work your ass off. Am I allowed to say ass? If I'm Nicki Minaj, I'm allowed to say ass.
You're well allowed to say ass or
Ass,
anything you
ass,
want to
ass,
say.
ass, ass,
Just
ass.
rest of the interview can just be that.
It's my new thing, man. But you know, you just never know. And you know, it can be any number of things. Maybe the label weren't putting, you know, everything they could into it. Maybe, you know, the fans didn't really, you know, people are nostalgic. They don't want change. They
Mm.
want things to stay the same, especially things that are really successful. So my guess is that, you know, maybe, you know, the Shakespeare Sister, you know, true diehard fans didn't like that I was doing my own record, and they, you know, they didn't care for it. It sounded a little bit slicker maybe than, you know, Shakespeare Sister. It wasn't quite as dark, except, you know, for some songs, but it was just different. You know, I'm not going to sit here and analyze my own work, but, or analyze why people like or don't like something, but.
I mean, I think people liked it. I mean, I'm not under the impression that people, I mean, you know, I've read your memoir where you talked about kind of how the label kind of gave up on it too fast, which, you know, is not an uncommon story, obviously, you know, and lots of artists have had that happen to them. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'm asking, were you kind of, it'd be human of you to have been disappointed that a record that, and we'll talk more about the making of a record you put so much care into, that was coming out at what seemed like such a perfect time, didn't get the treatment that it, or the attention that it deserved.
Yeah, I was disappointed. And it's like you can tell, you know, when a boyfriend or somebody
Mm.
is going off you. I have a crazy innate sense where I can feel the interest wane, you know, slowly waning. And I just felt that from the label. They just started to become lackadaisical about things, and they were asking me to do things that I felt were that didn't really show me in any kind of light with integrity, in doing some things, and some interviews that I did, and some TV shows
Do you mind
that
me
I did.
asking, what was it, like
Oh,
wear this dumb outfit, or
no, they never told me what to wear.
that's
I
good.
I I knew what I wanted to wear, and I had great stylists. I had Judy Blame, who was iconic, and he was wonderful, and you know, he helped put me together, and then a few other people. A girl named Vanessa, who was married to Jürgen Teller. I'll
Hmm,
remember her last name in a minute, but
that's all right.
so I had great people I was working with. It
Absolutely.
wasn't about that, but they were concerned about my look, that it was maybe too much. I don't know. They wanted me to bring it back. And I'm like,
No, 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 no. They were wrong. You know, I'm a fan of too much. Too much is
yeah,
always is
yeah,
a good
yeah.
thing. Too much of a good thing is a good thing.
I really loved it, and I loved that direction that it was going. I mean, I was emo before emo was cool, man. I mean, I had like shaved eyebrows and wore black, like, I was a hippie, but then I became like kind of goth. And this is
Hmm.
when I was a teenager and I came to the table with shaved eyebrows, and my dad was like, "What in God's sakes is going on?" I was a rebel. So anyway, I digress. I
No, it's a good
loved
digression. Did
I
your
loved,
eyebrows grow back, by the way?
huh? Yeah, yeah, no
They
problem.
don't always grow back.
I know I was lucky while I was young, so
I know from experience,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I digress. Um, but it's interesting because you were talking about I used to be a hippie and stuff. And then you went in all these other directions. I don't think a lot of people knew at the time. I mean, some real diehard music fans knew, but I don't think a lot of Shakespeare Sisters fans, I should say, realized that you'd had this whole life, this whole career before you came in the band. And I don't mean this in any shady way, but by the time Joe came out, weren't you like pushing 40, which you were like, I'm trying to say in the music industry, well, particularly now it's super ageist, but now I just watched like Cyndi Lauper's documentary, and she was 30 when Girls Just Want to Have Fun came out, and Madonna was like 24 when her first album came out. And even by industry standards, that was on the older side of things. So
Oh,
like you
yeah.
kind of got your big break, kind of like Sheryl Crow, actually, like a little later in life. You'd had this whole career before that maybe people didn't even know about.
Oh, well, I was a session singer and a writer, and I was in Eric Clapton's band and helped write one of his biggest hits. And
Mm-hmm.
people had no idea. And I worked with a lot of my idols like Bob Seger, Leon Russell, George Duke, Stanley Clark, Alice Cooper, Robin Gibb. I was doing a
Yeah.
lot of session work, and Bette Midler. I was doing a lot of session work for lots of different people.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was funny because when I was doing promotion for Stay, and I was doing some interviews, and let's see, how old was I? I was already 40 when it became a huge hit.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
didn't even well, I mean, no one would be able to tell that unless you said that. But I imagine I mean, was it a don't ask, don't tell situation? Like downplay the fact that you
Yeah,
are
yeah,
older?
kind of. Well, you know as well as I do, especially for women, it's a very ageist business. But I was going to say that I was doing this interview for this magazine called Smash Hits, which is like a teeny bop magazine. And they're like,
Mhm.
one of the questions was, "Do you think you're going to be doing this kind of thing when you're 40?" And actually, I was going to turn 40 in 2 months. And I was like, I don't know. I was thinking to myself, why don't you ask me in 2 months? Give me
That's
a call
hilarious.
back.
I mean, I guess it's flattering that but why again, but who cares why I stopped myself because I was saying, oh, it's flattering. They thought you were younger than 40, but what's wrong with being 40? Like, what's wrong with that?
Especially for women. What is wrong with that? I mean, well, according to society, we use our sex appeal once we reach a certain age as women. Is
So
my simplistic take on it.
So was that something you were struggling with either in those days or when you were making and promoting Jewel? The fact that, you were competing with this 94. So what it would have been, the grunge women of the day, Hole and Garbage and No Doubt. And maybe I'm getting the timeline wrong, but Alanis, people like that. It would have been around that time.
Yeah, it was
Um,
around.
so yeah, basically I'm asking, were you or your label or whatever, did you have to contend with ageism in the fact that you were launching or relaunching or elevating your solo career as a woman over the age of 40?
If I was, I didn't know about it. In other words, I had nobody saying to me,
That's good.
"Oh, we're not doing this interview because, such and such magazine doesn't want to interview old women over the age of, 40." So if that was the case, I was not aware of it. But I mean, who knows? I don't know.
So it's interesting, and I mean this as a compliment, not as shade. It's surprising to me that you were a session singer or backup singer because your voice is so distinctive. It's so high. I could pick it out of any lineup. I just mentioned how iconic it was in Stay, but like I was watching, and don't think we're not going to talk about the Robin Gibb duet from Times Square, but I was watching that video and I'm like, yeah, I mean, your voice is so unique. Like, I feel like it would overpower any famous person you sang, or at least, I mean, I'm not a musician myself, but my impression is that background singers are supposed to be in the background, and you're very much, I'd call you a foreground singer. I just made that up.
I like it.
Was that ever like, I'm kind of surprised that I mean, obviously you're a great singer, so like you had that box checked, but like, did you ever have to tone it down, I guess?
No, I mean, the people, like world-class producers were calling me because they wanted my sound. My voice, even though it does stand out, it cuts clear through.
Hmm.
It also blends really well with other people. And I don't
Okay.
think it ever took away from, the artist, whatever, whoever I was performing with, like with Aretha Franklin, she was my vocal idol. So getting to sing on a record that she did with George Benson called Love All the Hurt Away, and
Wow.
was, I had Arif Mardin, who was, this amazing producer. I mean, if you look him up, I mean, he's done some incredible things, Grammy Award winning,
Yeah.
and a complete gentleman and a brilliant musician and arranger. He wanted my sound because he knew it would work with whatever artist he was working with. So I was never told to do that. But yeah, it had a way of blending really well with all these people.
You mentioned that he was a complete gentleman, which is good to hear. But yeah, I imagine you did have to contend with some. Actually, it doesn't seem like, from reading your memoir, that you did have to contend with a lot of sexism, or because you were in a very much a boys' club. Like, you were singing, you were touring with Bob Seger and Eric Clapton, and all these like classic rock dudes. For some women, they wouldn't be accepted in that world, or it would be difficult for them, or they would have to contend with a lot of you know, misogyny or being hit on or whatever. But it seemed
Well,
like
there was a
you
lot of that.
okay. Well, tell me about that, because it seemed like you always got respect in that world from what I've observed.
Uh, yeah, I did, but there were things that, that I probably shouldn't really kind of, say because it might make me look bad.
Oh,
But there were moments that were difficult. I made choices of being with certain people, and it maybe wasn't the smartest choices, but the difference was, even though I've had people, rib me and say, like, immediately when they heard I worked with Eric Clapton, like, they said to me, I'm not going to say the F word, but I'm just going to say the F word. They asked me, hey, well, you wrote this big hit for Eric. Did you F him? I'm like, well, first of all, that is so disrespectful, I think, to me as an artist, to me as a singer, to me as a woman, that you would think I would have to do that to get respect, to be respected for what I do. Um, I had someone do that to me once on stage. They introduced me and they said, hey, this is Marcy Levy, and she co-wrote Lay Down Sally. Hey, Marcy, did you? I'm
what
like, I was just like, wow.
what did you do? Did you
It
like
was a
laugh it off?
woman too. It was a woman.
Was it a journalist? Was it a DJ, like a shock rock type what the hell?
No, she was a guitarist. I was really shocked.
She was probably jealous that you were
Yeah,
performing with one of the greatest guitarists of all time, and
yeah,
she wasn't.
yeah, yeah. And she
Wow.
wasn't. She's a good guitarist. She's very good. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. And then I got in relationship with Leon Russell, which is a
Hmm.
long story, but we don't have to talk about that at all. I think you probably read about it in the book. I was madly in love with him, or I was enamored with him. I was infatuated, and ended up being in his band and working with him and touring with him, and just completely besotted, and it wasn't because I wanted to further my career. I know a lot of women do that intentionally, but for me, I was just like, goo
You,
goo.
yeah, you had posters of him on your wall, and you like dreamt of meeting him as a kid, right? But
That's right. Yeah.
how long did you date him, or how long were you in a relationship with him?
About 9 months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But did you get a hard time for that from your peers? Like, oh, you're sleeping with your collaborate? Because you did work together musically as well, which is not an uncommon thing. I mean, look at Fleetwood Mac. It's not uncommon for people in bands to date.
No, there's like a psychological thing. It's like a transference, or I can't remember exactly what it's called when you're working closely with people and they're the only people around you. You start to become attracted to them. It's a natural occurrence. But no, I mean, I was completely besotted. So to be with him, and he actually wrote a song about me that was released on an album, which was, are you
What,
kidding me?
what was the song?
It's called Time for Love.
Aw,
Yeah.
wow.
Randy
So
Crawford covered it too.
what happened between, I mean, why did it end?
I don't know, it got weird, man. It just got weird. We were on the road and things got a little bit crazy. So he kind
Uh,
of lost interest. I lost interest. So
it
yeah, you know,
happens. It happens, but that's pretty,
happened.
I mean, there's no reason why someone should disrespect someone because they dated someone, even if the person is famous. It's like a workplace romance is how I see it.
Right, exactly.
As long as it's consensual, which obviously this very much was.
Yeah.
But to go back to Jewel, you obviously have collaborated a lot of people on their records, and there's more I want to talk about that. But on this record, you were inviting collaborators into your playground, and you had like Phil from Roxy Music, and you had Jules Holland and Elton John duetting with you. I
Yeah.
mean, talk about living the dream. How did you recruit all these like awesome legends to be on your record?
Well,
And take, I assume, take direction from you. You were calling the shots as opposed to when you're a session singer for someone like that.
yeah, but as far as Phil Manzanera, I didn't know Phil, but Chris
Oh,
Thomas, my producer, is the one who suggested him. He helped me. I knew that I wanted my drummer from Shakespeare's Sister, Chuck Sabo. I knew that I wanted him to play on the album. Um, the rest of it, I knew I'd be playing some guitar, but Chris Thomas, who's like, this iconic producer, has worked with Pink Floyd and the Beatles, and not to mention In Excess and so many other incredible bands. But he's the one who got Phil recruited into the scene, which was great. And then there was a bass player, may he rest in peace, Phil Spalding, who was fantastic. And Jules Holland played on a few tracks. But the way the Elton John situation came about was Chris got a call from Elton saying, hey, I'm working on a duets album. It's called Duets for One, and I would like you to produce it. And Chris said, well, I'm sorry, I can't because I'm working on Marcella Detroit's album. And Elton said, oh, well, I'd love to do a duet with her. Have her pick a song. So Chris told me, yeah, I got this call from Elton and he wants to do a song with you. And I was like, what? Oh my God. Okay. So I thought I would love to do the Border song. It was one of my favorites. And I love the way Aretha Franklin did it. So I said, I would love to do the Border song and maybe do it kind of like Aretha did it. But Elton didn't want to do it. So he said, no, I don't really want to do that song. So I came up with Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing, which is a Motown classic, my hometown. And I love the song. And we were messing around with ideas and it fit in with the vibe of my record. I have a song called Detroit on there, which is like an ode to Marvin Gaye, kind of Motown. So we came up with like that sexual healing kind of groove and worked on it. And then Elton came to the studio and we sang it together.
and
Which was,
had you, well, you hadn't met him before then.
I had
Okay.
actually, he doesn't recall. But when I was working with Clapton, one crazy night when we were partying, we went over to Elton's house in England. It was outside of London, out in the country, and we were all doing drugs, and they were passing the album around with the crazy white powder, and yeah. So we had partied before, but he didn't remember that.
I mean, I've read his memoir. I can understand why he might not remember every party he's had at his house, but that's pretty cool. You got to later duet with one of the greatest to do it.
Right? Yeah,
It's
that
crazy.
was incredible. And he was
when this,
so wonderful.
how long, like what memories do you have of that session? Like, was it like a quick thing or were you like together all day? He seems like a pro, as are you, that could just kind of like, bang it out in a couple of takes.
Yeah, we just did it really in one take, us
Oh, wow.
two together. And I overdubbed the harmonica later. But yeah, it was pretty quick, but he hung around. He sent me some beautiful flowers. And then we did a show. We were supposed to do a show in France. He invited me to join him on this jet that he hired. And we flew over there while I was watching him look through a Sotheby's catalog. He was going to buy some paintings. And we got to France. We were doing this big show, and we were going to do Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing. And I got back from the rehearsal at this big arena to my hotel room, and on the bed was this beautiful outfit from Versace. He was friends with Johnny
Hmm.
Versace, and he gave me this beautiful outfit that I was going to wear. But unfortunately, we went back to the show, and it went on for hours because it was interrupted by this group called Act Up, which
Mm.
was a political group, and they were protesting the show. So we were waiting and waiting, waiting. We never actually got to do the show. Liza Minnelli was there. She was backstage, and she was getting drunker by the minute. And Elton was like, I'm going to do the Rainforest concert tomorrow with Sting. So I have to jump on Concord. And it was after midnight, and we still didn't perform. So he said, I'm really sorry, I have to leave. But we did Top of the Pops together.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
he was so wonderful. He was really generous and really a wonderful person, very professional, like you said.
Do you still have that Versace outfit? I hope you do.
I don't.
Like, how does one, like, did you sell it or give it like, no one loses a Versace outfit, or I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe.
You know what? I don't know. I mean, I've
Oh,
moved a few times since then, so I have like remnants of it, these really cool stockings that kind of went with the outfit. I have those, but
okay.
I don't know what else, where everything else is.
I hope you have some of your iconic outfits. Like all of the Shakespeare sister looks were just like so stunning and so like unique. Like you really had like a look, that group. Like it was kind of Harlequin and it was kind of like Miss Havisham, but it was also it was kind of emo in a way, in like a My Chemical Romance Black Parade kind of way. I never thought of it, but like the eyeliner and like the sharp hair. I hope you have some of those looks, like
I
still.
do have some of them, yes. Yeah.
So when Jewel came out, like I'm under the impression by the time it came out, you and Siobhan from Shakespeare Sister were no longer speaking. You didn't speak for like 25 years or something. But do you know what she thought of this record? I'm under the impression that there was always like, there was competitiveness maybe between you. She went on and continued to do her thing. You went off to continue to do your thing. And, there was always a little bit of friction between you guys. Do you know what she thought of this record? What I thought was funny is I don't think this was on Jewel, but the next record, or the next single, which was called it was called like I Hate You Now.
Yeah.
People thought that was about her.
Yeah, yeah. And it made headlines. There were all these headlines. They made it into like an Oasis thing, where brothers were hating on each other. That had nothing to do with her. It actually had to do with somebody at the record company at London Records who was telling me what, was at one point supporting me, at the next point turned against me. And they
Mm,
were just kind of, I felt like, restricting me and holding me back and not allowing me to be who I was as an artist.
interesting. You're back with them. Obviously, it's a completely different roster
Oh,
of
yeah.
people working there now. But yeah, what did Siobhan? Did you get any feedback about how she thought about your solo career?
No, not a word.
Interesting. So I said I wanted to lightning round things. I have a whole list of lightning round stuff. Some of it we've already kind of covered, like Elton John and Leon Russell. But okay, I want to find out about how you came to write Lay Down Sally, which was probably a calling card for you. That was early in your career, and you could go around being like, "Hey, I wrote this massive, classic rock staple song." Like,
Right.
how'd that come about? Because you were pretty not inexperienced, but it was early in your career.
Oh, it was very early in my career. I was only in my, early 20s,
Oh,
really.
wow.
Yeah. Um, yeah, basically I was in Eric's band, and it was like maybe the third album we had worked on together, and touring and recording, and Glyn Johns was producing, and we were in the studio in London in the iconic studio called Olympic. And we were recording one day. Eric just came in and said, hey, Marcy, I want to write a song. I'd like to write a song called Lay Down Sally. And I was like, oh, Lay Down Sally. So I don't know. And I've heard other writers talk about this, like Willie Nelson as well. You just kind of pluck these ideas out of the air. That titles really inspire me, and they have a rhythm to them. And I don't know if you let your imagination go wild and go free, it had a cadence to it, and the melody just came to me. It was a whole different groove. The way the idea that I had for it was more like a Little Feat song, like a Bo Diddley song, like a bump, the bump, the bump, kind of like that. So we worked on it all day, wrote the chorus, and we couldn't really come up with the verse. So Eric and George Terry, the other guitarist, and I were working on writing it, and the band got bored after 5 hours. They left. Some of them got left, and then Eric started playing the groove that it became on the record, and Glenn was like, "Oh God, we have to record this right now." Keyboard player, like I said, or maybe I didn't say, he had left. So I got on the keyboard. I'm playing this really simple part on it. And we recorded the song. We had the chorus pretty much written, but we had a verse recorded, and Eric said to me, go back to the hotel tonight and write the rest of the song. So I came back the next day with the rest of the melody and the lyric for the verses. And that was that.
That's pretty amazing. I do understand though, you got kind of screwed out of the publishing though.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what a lot of big artists do, is they give you your writer's share, but I was threatened that if I didn't give up my publisher's share, then the song wouldn't be on the album. And this happened to me with almost every song that I wrote with Eric, or not for Eric, but like when I wrote songs with Richard Feldman, because it was a guy, perhaps, they gave us the publishing. He gave Richard the publishing, and he administrates my share of it. But yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get the publishing for that song.
I hope you still made a decent chunk of change off that song, because I've heard horror stories where people write hits and get like quite literally nothing because they, like the Badfinger, like these terrible situations. I hope you weren't completely screwed out of.
Oh no. My writer's share was pretty lucrative, and still,
Okay.
I still, get residuals.
Well, that's good. I'm glad about that. So going farther ahead, skipping ahead like more than a decade, with Eric Clapton, you gotta tell me what it was like to play Live Aid. That's
Right. Well,
iconic.
It was incredible, man. That was when I joined his band for the second time. And because I wrote a song with a guy I mentioned, Richard Feldman, who actually also put me together with Siobhan. And when they moved in across the street from him in LA. But anyway, Richard and I wrote a song called Tangled in Love. And Jamie Oldaker, the drummer from Tulsa, who I was in the band with the first time and who invited me to move to Tulsa, he offered to get the song to Eric. So we got the song to Eric, and Eric heard it, and he and Phil Collins called me one afternoon and said, "Oh, we really love your song. Can you come down to Montserrat and sing on it, and bring a friend who can sing?" And so I brought my friend Sean Murphy, who is one of the best singers I've ever heard. I mean, I don't know why she's not a household name. She's just incredible. So I called Sean, and we went down to Montserrat, and we ended up singing on that song and several other songs. And then Eric asked us if we'd like to be in the band, kind of like the first way I was asked to be in the band after singing on one of the albums. There's One in Every Crowd. After singing on 4 or 5 songs, would you like to be in the band? And that was the same thing. Would you like to be in the band? So I was like, yeah, sure. So that's how that started. And doing Live Aid is what you asked about. Sorry, I got sidetracked.
No, that was interesting. But yeah, Live Aid, I mean, that obviously that was historic, and like pretty much everyone was there.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we got there and I saw we were in the elevator with Chrissy Hine and Madonna was walking around on the day with Sean Penn and Duran Duran and it was, oh man, it was such an incredible experience. And the way it worked was you'd be back in the, in the kind of green room tent areas, and then they would let you know when it was your turn to get prepared to get on stage. So we got word. We were waiting for Phil Collins to come over because he had just done the performance in London at Wembley.
Hmm.
And so he got on Concorde and we were waiting for his plane to land. And when we got word that he landed, and got in the helicopter, it was a little late, but anyway, we got up on stage and his helicopter came down and we were all on stage. It was a revolving stage. So you took your place and there was a curtain. And as the band in front of you finished, we were behind them and with the curtain drawn. And then, Phil was there. He jumped up on stage, got behind the drums, and then the stage started moving around and the curtain opened to like over 100,000 people, and the sound of it was like I just got goosebumps again, chills. Like it was so loud. I was standing, there was Eric on my left, and I remember the sound was like, it was so loud. That didn't do it justice. But he looked at me and I looked at him and we both went, whoa, oh my God. I mean, if you watch the performance and the way it opens, you can see us both doing that. But it was incredible. The crowd were just so supportive and so into it. And one of my favorite songs was doing White Room. That was
Oh, wow.
my favorite ever Cream songs. And I loved when we did that.
Was that the largest audience it probably was the largest audience you had played to at that point in your life, but is it the largest audience you've ever played to? Live audience.
Well, I mean, if you're counting, hundreds of millions of people watching all around the world,
That's true too.
there's that. But also, I mean, when I worked with Eric previously, the first time I was in his band, we did this amazing festival in Germany where there were 120,000 people there. Led Zeppelin played it, Bob Dylan. I mean, it was just crazy.
Wow. So
Yeah.
that was iconic and historic, but in my opinion, equally iconic and historic is the final scene of, I'm sad and embarrassed, yet proud to say, the movie that turned me on to the Beatles, Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. I'm
Ah.
obsessed with that movie. I've got the DVD over there. I love that. I hate watch and love that movie at the same time. So that for people who haven't had the pleasure of seeing it, at the very end, there's like a who's who of like very random people, all the people there in the movie, but also like everyone from Tina Turner to Sha Na Na. I think Carol Channing's in there. Like it's the most 70s thing ever, 1978. And I
Yeah.
need to rewatch the DVD and find you because you were in that scene.
I was, and I
Tell
got the
me
director's.
everything. Tell me everything about that day.
That's funny. You had asked me before. It's kind of like a blur, to be honest. I mean, at the time, I was signed to RSO Records, and Robert Stigwood was trying to help me. He was trying to promote me, put me together with Robin Gibb, and I was going to work on my solo album, and so he got me to this part. He got me this opportunity to be in the finale, and like you said, there were so many notables there. I was just, getting like a whiplash from looking around and seeing all these incredible people there and doing this finale. But I don't really remember much of it, to be quite honest. I just remember being there and they had a director's chair with my name on it. And I got to take that with me.
Please
And
say you still have that.
I don't know. I have some Eric Clapton tour bags, but
Okay.
and I have a thing that Robert Stigwood gave me, this kind of pig, like a piggy bank, the
Oh my
RSO
God.
red pig. So I have that.
Well, I'm curious about, I mean, I could go on forever about that movie, but obviously, some of the biggest 70s stars of that time were in it, like the Bee Gees and Peter
Yeah, the
Frampton and
Bee
yeah, all the Bee Gees and Peter Frampton. And, it was kind of a too big to fail situation. Like when you were on the set, the movie flopped and it really like hurt the Bee Gees' career. It hurt RSO. It hurt Peter Frampton's career. He wouldn't even talk about that movie for years. If you watch if you watch the Bee Gees documentary, like they don't even mention Sergeant Pepper at all. They just gloss over it. But I guess to bring it back to you is like when you were on the set, surrounded by all this rock royalty, were you like, wow, it's gonna be like, were you like, oh, this movie's really like what are they thinking? Or were you like, this is gonna be the biggest movie of all time?
Well, you would think that. You would think it was going to be hugely successful,
Yeah.
all the acts that they had, participating in it. It seemed like a no-brainer, but obviously, like you said, it wasn't very well received.
But did you think like, wow, I'm gonna be in like, this huge movie, like this is gonna be like the biggest movie in 1978?
Yeah, I mean, you would think I did. Yeah, I did think that. I thought I was impressed and I was honored to be included in it. And yeah, I mean, but like I said, you just don't know what is going to take off and what's not, It doesn't matter, how great the people that are in it.
Do you remember who you were standing next to or where in the lineup you are? Because I need to look for you. Who were you, who in that group, where are you in that like kind of class picture style setup?
I believe that if you're looking at the screen, so that would be stage right. So I would be on your left
Okay. Who are
is
you
where I
next
remember
to?
being. Huh?
Who are you next to?
I don't remember.
It's so funny when I interview people, like, obviously you've done so much in your life. That was just like one day of your life. If that was like, that would have been like the best day of my life or the most memorable it would have been like my
I
top
know.
10 days of my life. That's fair enough. There was another movie, I mentioned it briefly, that you and Robin Gibb did a song for, another cult classic movie that has come to take on a life of its own, midnight movie. 2 years later, Times Square comes out, big punk movie. I think very ahead of its time. I think that one's maybe held in higher esteem these days than Sergeant Pepper was. But tell me about the song "Help Me" that you did from that movie. I actually just watched the video or a video on YouTube of you performing, and you look very 70s in it. You don't look very 80s punk at all. You got like a little feathered, like Dorothy Hamill, kind of like Christy McNichol hairdo. You look very cute. What
Oh,
memories do you
thanks.
have of making that song?
Well, Robin and his partner Blue Weaver, after we spoke, they wrote it for us to do a duet specifically,
Mm.
and they flew me over to London to do the video and to record. And I mean, I was just, as a kid, I grew up with the Bee Gees, so to work with Robin was just I couldn't believe this was happening, really. I mean, he was incredible to work with. He was an absolute genius, and all the people around him were as well. But I remember when I did the video, I was so jet lagged. They flew me over to London and I had to do the video the next day. And, I know it's kind of boring and big deal. Everyone has jet lag, but I remember it being particularly bad. But Robin was really sweet. And I remember wearing something, doing a photo shoot where I was wearing like a kimono thing, and my top flew open and my tits were out. And it was like, oh my God, I was so embarrassed. But I was called what did he call me? The Rene Rousseau of rock. That's what
Oh,
the photographer called me. You're the Rene Rousseau of rock. I'm like, wow, well, that's a big compliment. But working with Robin was always a treat. He was so professional, um, brilliant musician, um, great composer, knew what he wanted. And then he invited me to work on the Jimmy Ruffin album,
oh, nice.
excuse me, which was also a treat. Yeah, great guy.
Um, there's a couple other collaborators I have to ask you about.
Yeah.
One is the guy who played father son in one of the more redeemable musical scenes from Sergeant Pepper, and that is Alice Cooper, as he is better known. You duetted with Alice Cooper, which is
Yeah.
pretty awesome. Tell me about that.
Well, that came about during my session days here in LA. Um, sorry, I got
Oh,
excuse me,
mhm.
smog in my throat. Sorry.
Oh, I got to hear you do a little pop star to opera
Yeah.
star.
It helps drain the sinuses. Sorry about that. Allergies. I got bad allergies this year.
All
It's
good.
crazy. So I was doing a lot of session work. I had worked with David Foster, the producer, quite a
Hmm.
bit. we were doing an album. He was producing it on me for RSO Records, which ended up not being released. But
Oh,
still, David called me. I don't know, the record company president didn't like it. Al Corey, he was like, "Oh, this, that wasn't what they had in mind." It was a bit slick. David was very slick,
he's slick.
very
Hey,
R&B, you know,
I mean, you
very,
don't hire David Foster if you don't want slick. I mean, he's the king of slick.
right? If they wanted a rock album, they
He
shouldn't
ain't
have.
Steve Albini. I mean, what did they expect?
Yeah, I know, right? But anyway, so David said, "Hey," he called me and said, "Would you like to come do this duet with Alice Cooper?" I've been doing loads of stuff for him. I worked with Daryl Hall on some stuff, and
Hmm.
I was a big fan of Alice because him being from Detroit. Growing up, in my teens, I would go see Alice whenever I had the opportunity. So it was really funny too, because when I heard the song, it's called Millie and Billy, and it's about this couple in an insane asylum. And the guy, he ends up killing somebody in the insane asylum. And that's where my character goes, "Oh, Billy." And it's just this crazy song. Meanwhile, in between us doing takes and David talking to Alice and David are talking about golfing. And I just thought, what an odd juxtaposition of, doing this song and listening to them talking about golfing. Very strange. But what a thrill. I mean, we did the duet together. And Alice he's such a brilliant performer. I mean, he still is. I've seen stuff that he's done lately, and he's just so in it, like right from the first second. And apparently that whole era of his, he went to rehab or something. He went somewhere to clean up, and this was a song that he wrote kind of about that experience. And obviously his imagination he allowed it to, run wild and talking about killing somebody. But
What year was this? Was this like during his like cocaine new wave albums? Like,
uh I believe, well, it was probably early 80s. I
yep,
would
it was
say
then.
like,
The
yeah,
answer's
like 82, maybe
yep.
81. Yeah.
It's an era of Alice Cooper I actually really like, but like Clones is my favorite Alice Cooper song, but I like new wave cocaine Alice, but it was a song like lyrically it doesn't sound like it was a departure from kind of the shock rock that Alice originated, but was it musically kind of a departure for him from what people thought of him?
Um, I think it was still in keeping. I mean, it wasn't, it was David producing, but it still had that rock element. Maybe not as raw as normally, but like you said, the shock rock, the content was still the same kind of Alice Cooper, exciting, shocking like content.
And then you've had quite a diverse roster of collaborators, so we have to bring it home with someone you mentioned, your vocal idol. Like you got to sing with Aretha. Like, come on.
Yeah.
What was it like? Was it everything you thought it would be and more?
Well, I remember when Arif, called me, he said, "I want you to come and do the session." And I ended up being with this guy that I had done work with before, the singer named Mark Stevens, who was a great singer, and we had an incredible blend together. Um, so Aretha was not there, but it was a duet that
Oh,
she did with George Benson. And I had met Aretha, funnily enough, a few times because my sister went to school with her son,
oh
Ted
wow.
Teddy White Jr., who ended up being in her band. And subsequently, I would go see him play with Aretha every time she came to LA, like at the Hollywood Bowl and wherever. But this was like a whole different thing to sing on one of her records. I mean, that was incredible. So I just remember doing the session and it sounded immaculate. And Aretha came in to listen when we were done with the vocals, and
Wow.
Arif was playing it really loudly over the speakers, and she was walking around going, yeah, yeah, she really loved it. She loved it. And it was just such a moment for me. to have one of your idols and to perform something for one of your idols was an incredibly fulfilling thing.
Was that, I was going to ask you if that was your career highlight, but yeah, what would, I mean, you've had so many, but if push comes to shove, what is the crowning glory achievement of your career? When you look back, you can be like, I did that.
Wow. Well, I think, when I was a teenager and I had those, like you mentioned earlier, I had those posters of Leon Russell all over my walls, and my mother thought I was crazy because he looked kind of weird. He had this long, like silver hair, and he painted his face like the Carney, and had all this paint on his face. And my mom was, who is this? And I said, I'm going to sing with him one day, Mom. And she just went, oh, laughed at me like I was out of my mind. And then a few years later, when I did, um, it just proved to me that you can do whatever you want if you obviously have the skill and you really put all your heart and soul into something. You can achieve whatever you want to. And then the universe, once I set my sights on that to me was a huge win, because I set this goal and I achieved it. And then I just kept achieving more. I was in his band and touring around the country. And then this opportunity for Eric Clapton, who, if you would have told me when I was a kid going to this crazy place called the Grandy Ballroom in Detroit, if you look it up, it was an iconic place where the Cream, Janis Joplin, everybody you can think of played there, even the Who. And I saw Cream playing there. And if you would have told me at the time, well, you're going to sing with that guy one day, I never would have believed it. So I don't take it all lightly. It's, to me, like, wow, you can really achieve anything you want to if you want it bad enough. And of course, do it with integrity, but be good at your craft and just put your blinders on and really go for it. I think all of it is, I'm so proud of so many achievements that I've accomplished.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, as well you should be. I hope this question doesn't seem negative in any way, but I'm a little surprised you aren't better known. I mean, people know Lay Down Sally, they know Shakespeare Sister, they know the songs you've been involved in, the projects you've been involved in. But I mean, if someone who doesn't know much about you just even skims your Wikipedia page, they're going to be like, holy crap, like all this? It's like you're kind of like a well-kept secret, not in the industry. Everyone in the industry knows who you are, but yeah, you kind of like just quietly, stealthily like built this like you're like a secret superstar. Am I making sense? Like,
Yeah.
like why do you think perhaps your name isn't as well known as the music that you've made? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I do know what you're saying, and I wonder and marvel at that sometimes too, but it's not really for me to know. I mean, it's just the way it is. Maybe it's because, like, I'm secretly really shy,
Are you?
I'm actually a shy person. Yeah, I've had to not be shy because um I put myself out. I chose a profession that puts me in front of people and having to express myself. But I think secretly, I'd rather just be like on a private island and enjoy the ocean and the dolphins and the turquoise water. That could be it. And maybe because I wasn't willing to do some things that it might have taken, like wear practically nothing and do things and maybe not sleep with the right people to get me to where I had to be. Or I don't know, maybe it's just, I don't know, maybe it's just not my lot in life. I don't know.
Well, your law in life is still pretty awesome. I mean, you have a career that 99.999% of musicians would absolutely envy. And now 30 years after you put out Jewel, you're getting this deluxe treatment from a record label that you once wrote a hate song about. So like
I know.
everything's kind of coming full circle. Is there anything before I let you go that we can talk about what fans can expect from this big jewel box, as it were?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that I don't want to criticize or denigrate anything that I've done up to this point, because I'm really grateful of what I've achieved and I'm really proud of it. And I don't take any of it for granted. You just have to ask yourself, why did I get into this? Was it for the fame? Was it, initially I didn't really care about money. I just wanted to sing. Of course, you realize that after a certain point, you got to make a living. You got to be able to live. You got to support yourself. So, making money at it was helpful. I'm not a starving musician living on the street, but I am grateful for it.
Of
And
course.
I'm always learning. I'm always trying to learn new things, push, experiment. So yeah, I'm really grateful for it. As far as what's on this record, well, it's the album. They remastered some of the songs and added different versions of some of the songs. And as a bonus, my husband, after we had met here in LA through a mutual friend, he wrote a song to me called Out of My Mind. And it's just basically, I just can't get you out of my mind. He lived in England. I lived here in LA. And when he came back, when I saw him again, he presented me with this song that was so beautiful. I thought I just have to record this one day. And ended up being on my Jewel album. And as a special treat, he and I did a duet of it, just an acoustic duet. And it's just really beautiful. The president of London Records once said to me, like when I was touring around the UK playing Stay on my own, just with the acoustic guitar, he said, you can really tell a good song when you can just accompany yourself with a guitar or a piano and it still holds up. Well, this song holds up with just an acoustic guitar and our two voices, and it's really beautiful. So we've got that as well, and I'm really excited about sharing that with everybody and all the really cool remixes that they've done as well.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on that. And by the way, your husband performed at Eurovision. He competed at Eurovision. I just want to point that
That's
out.
right.
One day I'll interview him about that because I'm like a Eurovision obsessive. But yeah, what a life you've had. And it's really great to see it celebrated with this album that I know meant so much to you and that you put so much into, and that people are getting to hear it again. If they didn't hear it the first time, it's getting this push again. And maybe
Yeah.
you'll be introduced to some new fans.
Yeah.
Because I think probably some people also rediscovered you when Shakespeare's Sister reunited in 2018. And, is there any plans for more? I mean, I know you put out I think it was just an EP at that time, right? Was there any plan for another EP or more music, or was that just a one-off reunion?
I think that's done.
That's all right. You put a nice little bow on it,
Yeah.
and like I said, it got introduced to some new fans, and now more fans will get to hear Jewel. And yeah, and I mean, I've talked to you for an hour, so I should probably let you go. But you have an hour's worth of life highlights, so it was an honor to get to kind of pick your brain about them.
Thank you, Lindsay. It was really a pleasure to talk to you too. And I know we've been meaning to do this for a while, so I really appreciate it.
Thanks. I appreciate you as well. You have a wonderful day, and thanks for this great conversation.